so much of our validation, our wanting of validation, reassurance is external with our OCD. Of like, if my therapist said this, if this person said this, if social media influencer said this. And so that point of self-trust that we gain through our OCD is definitely transferred to having a baby too. It's that self-trust piece that listen to your main resources that you want to listen to. There's going to be people who say X, Y, and Z of how you should feel again and how you should be again, but listen to that compass, or whatever that compass that is in terms of, your inner wisdom or, something higher, God, just listening to that and bringing that resource. And I think that's a beautiful thing about being human is we have that ability to choose that.
Hi, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Sarah Yudkin, and I'm a relationship anxiety coach who's here to help you learn about all things love, relationships, and how to navigate anxiety in your relationships. If relationships are really meaningful to you and you've gotten any value from my videos so far, I'd love to invite you to subscribe to my channel and become a member of the You Love and You Learn community. This goes a long way to supporting me in this channel and makes sure that you don't miss any new videos coming out. And if you enjoy this video, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me a like and a comment so I know what's resonating. Thank you for watching, and let's get into it. Hello, everybody. I'm excited to bring you this conversation. It is actually the second time that I've had this guest on, and I am bringing back Kiyomi LaFleur to the podcast, who is a world-known founder and creator of Awaken into Love, which is an online community for people who experience relationship OCD and relationship anxiety. And she has dedicated the last 10 plus years to raising awareness on relationship OCD, anxiety, and conscious relationships. And Kiyomi has a background in social work, yoga therapy, and mindfulness. And I wanted to bring Kiyomi on because over the last couple years now, she has been a mom and she has been going through her own journey of becoming a mother and learning more about herself and learning more about how love works in different forms. And I am not yet a mom, but I am someone who hopes to be a mom one day. And so I was really curious to just hear her experience with motherhood, especially as someone who used to have a very deep experience with relationship OCD. And of course, Kiyomi has talked openly about that in her work. So I was really curious just to hear how her OCD and anxiety was or wasn't present during her journey to become a mom. So this is a slightly different type of episode, but I was really curious about it. And I think that you're going to learn a lot from this conversation. And whether or not you want to be a mom or a parent one day, or whether you already are, I hope that there are some good nuggets of wisdom in here for you. And thank you so much for listening. Let's get into the episode. Hi, Kiyomi. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. It's been, I think we were saying like 2 years or so since I've been on. So I'm so happy to be here and see you and talk to you.
Yes, I know. And so much has changed, I feel like, for both of us in those 2 years. And only some of that, makes it to our Instagram feeds as it does for anybody. So I guess my first question for you is like, how are you really? Like, what's going on with you?
Yeah. Um, right now in this moment, I feel like I'm doing really well. I feel as though, within the last, even the last couple of days within the last week, I feel like I've been going through a lot of different transformation and transition.
Mm.
A lot of different things have been happening internally, but overall, right now, I feel as though I am in, yeah, like a good state. I feel like I am feeling very spiritually grounded within myself, and that's been a huge blessing. So yeah, overall doing well in this moment, I would say, but things
Mm.
change all the time.
Yeah, they do. I also feel like I'm going through transition as well. So just to
Yeah.
normalize that, I think like with, upcoming wedding on a literal level, it's like, oh yeah, that's clearly a life transition, but also just in my own internal process of like, what is the work I'm doing in the world and how do I want to, get that out with social media and, the things I've been doing the last 5 years. Yeah, I'm like, I'm ready for some sort of growth and expansion. So I don't know if any of that resonates with you, but I just feel like we're all kind of in the thick of transition right now based on the conversations I'm having.
It resonates 100%. This is something that we've been trying to figure out, awaken into love for like honestly the past couple years. And I feel like, transitions itself can just bring up a lot. And I feel like I'm in the same exact boat with you with that. And I think what's cool about it is you typically see it like collectively. Like it's not like a thing where you're just doing it by yourself, where you're just transitioning. I've been seeing a lot of other people around me too, just kind of like, I want to expand, but I'm not really sure how, but something is calling me. I want to grow, but I'm not sure which way to go. So I've been feeling that exact way too recently. It's definitely been on my heart.
Yeah. And the last time we spoke and you came on the podcast, we were talking about resistance. So, I imagine that for both of us, there's probably a little bit of that
Yes.
showing up. I'll make sure to link to that in the show
Yes.
notes if someone hasn't heard that
Such a
episode
good
before.
topic.
But so much has changed since we last spoke, and you're a mom now. And I would just love to hear more about it. I mean, we're heading into our wedding, and it's not like you can never plan for what will happen after the wedding. But at some point, Nate and I do hope to be parents. And I feel like just hearing from someone who's been on that same journey and who has some of the same experiences that I've had as far as anxious or OCD type tendencies showing up in her life. Like, I just would love to know how the journey was for you. So, that's kind of a vague
Okay.
question, but I guess starting with what did you find to be your pregnancy experience?
Yeah, it's such a great question. It's interesting that you used like the word what was the experience for me because honestly, it still feels as though the experience is constantly like evolving and changing, even though
Mm,
pregnancy was, now 2 years ago, my son will be two next week. So it's almost
mm,
like a constant, I think motherhood is just this constant changing, evolving, and really pushing you to be okay with so many conflicting feelings at the same time. I think my husband and have been talking about having another baby and just different type of fears that have come up as we start talking about, this new transition again of having another child. But my pregnancy wise, I actually get a lot of questions asked from people in the OCD community because I think that sometimes we can read stuff online that can say, if you are prone to OCD and anxiety, your pregnancy can create like a lot more intensity. And I think that sometimes that can scare people away. But just from my personal experience, I had an incredible pregnancy.
mm.
And I think I just kind of want to put that out there because I think that we tend to hear a lot of kind of horror stories that people put out about pregnancy. And I'm not saying that, my experience will be everyone's experience, but I think it's also important to put out there and say, hey, even though I had debilitating ROCD before my pregnancy and had many OCD themes, I noticed that my journey with pregnancy wasn't as scary as I think sometimes people can, say. And we can get scared into that. People can think, oh, postpartum, that might be so scary. My ROCD might get horrible. But for me, I actually experienced no ROCD during my pregnancy.
Mm.
But did experience some, OCD themes here and there, especially after postpartum. But I did notice my pregnancy to be quite a beautiful experience. That doesn't mean that is for everyone. And if your experience wasn't that, that's still okay. But I think it's important to say that, hey, your experience can be beautiful too. It doesn't have to be so scary.
Yeah, I love that, making space for whatever the experience is, because I've had a few of my closest friends um, become moms in the last few years, and I feel like they all had such different journeys. And even as mothers, like I'm seeing them mother differently and show up as a parent differently, and I'm learning things from each of them. And so I feel like there can be blanket advice of what you should do when you're pregnant, or like make sure you
Oh,
are doing these things, and make sure as a mom you're doing these things. And it feels like there's just all this messages kind of similar to messages about relationships, like you should feel
yes.
this way, and when or like if you're not feeling this, something's wrong. And that can create, of course, for the more anxious mind, feeling this sense of I'm not doing this right, or something's wrong
Absolutely.
with me. So I'm glad you brought awareness to that.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you brought that up because I think that I was so actually surprised because, I've of course been in the RSD work with people with RSD for a long time. And I was like, okay, this is probably the most shoulds I've seen in terms of like you should feel in love with your partner, you should feel a certain way. But when I approach motherhood, I think the pressure of motherhood, even if it's pregnancy or postpartum, even after postpartum, the shoulds are just like incredibly strong. And I think that the blessing of RCD and relationship anxiety was the fact that I've been able to kind of tackle and question the should beliefs of our society in that specific way. So I was able to actually be like, okay, I'm noticing very strong cognitive distortions coming up right now, and how heavy it is in the social media world with pregnancy of, you shouldn't eat this, you should be feeling this, you shouldn't be doing this when you're pregnant, and all these type of things. Postpartum was, I think, a lot stronger, especially the first couple months postpartum. But the shoulds and the cognitive distortions are so heavy. And I think that's one thing I was actually very surprised about. And, just like a lovely warning for people who may have that, anxious brain, which most likely people here who are listening have that, to just, if you're stepping into pregnancy and postpartum, that most likely will come up, and to kind of normalize that in a sense that the pressure can be very strong. But I think the blessing of people with RCT and relationship anxiety is if you've gone through questioning the shoulds, you are a lot more equipped than you think you are with pregnancy and postpartum and just having a baby.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also too, all of the inner work that you've done, or if anyone's listening to this podcast, like a lot of people have been listening to this for multiple years, or they've been on some journey to try and build self-trust. So I think the path from listening to all shoulds to trusting your inner wisdom, or trusting a few selected resources versus like every single mom influencer on social media might not have their opinion needed in your brain, but maybe there's like one or two people who you really vibe with, or there's one nurse at your office that like really, really feels like a safe space. I've never gone through it, but I can just imagine that like trying to clear some of that noise so that you can hear, well, what do I actually feel would be best for me is a really important part of the process.
Beautiful. And I think that that's what we see so heavily with ROCD and relationship anxiety, right? Like this sense of like, okay, really taking our power back. I think that that's a big piece that I at least talk with our clients about, is the sense so much of our validation, our wanting of validation, reassurance is external with our RCD of like, if my therapist said this, if this person said this, if social media influencer said this. And so that point of self-trust that we gain through ROCD is definitely transferred to having a baby too. It's that self-trust piece that listen to your main resources that you want to listen to. There's going to be people who say X, Y, and Z of how you should feel again and how you should be again. But listen to that compass, well, whatever that compass that is in terms of, your inner wisdom or, something higher, God, just listening to that and bringing that resource. And I think that's a beautiful thing about being human is we have that ability to choose that.
Yeah. And before we get into life after, giving birth and that postpartum period, which I'm curious to hear your take on, was there anything spiritually or inner work that you felt like you did during the 9 to 10 months of being pregnant, or was it mostly like letting it flow as it happened?
A great question. I think most people that follow me know like my number one value and my passion is spirituality. Period, was very much using a lot of the tools that I had already used prior, and kind of just deepening in that way. My postpartum period has been extremely shocking, in terms of postpartum, I would say from almost questioning actually my spirituality and the practices that I've been doing, not with the RCD stuff, but just other forms. And then the last, year or so, I'm very surprised at the way that I've gone and kind of different type of uh, views that I now have, and different, I don't even know if it's practices in a way that I think is actually, very beautiful. I mean, I could kind of resort this back to RCD in terms of, we're constantly changing and we're constantly evolving. And so is our partner. And so are things around us. And it's incredible what motherhood can do to you. I think it's actually motherhood that really pushed me to actually question a lot of different things. I think in some way, I think your ego gets to a point where like, I got to figure it out. Like, I'm good. Like I have all of these tools, like I'm good to go. And then motherhood comes along. It's like, wait, no, actually there's a lot more evolution here and there's a lot more expansion. And you're probably very surprised by that. You meaning me talking to myself. But it's been incredible. So yeah, overall very surprised in terms of, my pregnancy looking different and now postpartum.
Yeah. And if it feels too vulnerable or like private, you don't have to share. But is there an example that comes top of mind of like what something is that you used to practice or think, or something that changed with motherhood? Because I feel like that type of stuff I'm sure would happen for many people like me too.
It's a great question, and it's something that my team and I have been talking about in terms of the way that I want to expand through Awaken into Love and just vulnerability with that. I think that what I've come to realize is I've been in the self-help, psychology, self-growth, new age world for, I would say, 15 years of my life, practice heavily. And I think I just came to the point where I think that we're in a place right now in our society where I'm questioning a lot of the movement around self-healing and self-growth. I think that there's almost like a dysfunctional proportion to it. So what I used to really solely do was just kind of be like, okay, next self-help, next self-healing, next fixing. And I think I didn't realize that there was actually a lot of shame behind it of never enough, never enough, never enough. And I think that our society right now is actually reinforcing it. I think that we have more coaches than ever, not in a bad way. I'm a coach, you're a coach, it's a beautiful thing. But we have coaches more than ever. We have influencers more than ever. We have self-help books more than ever and healing books more than ever. And being in that world for 15 years, I think I just came to a point of like, oh my goodness, it's a never ending project of self fixing. And underneath it is there's always something wrong with me, actually, in an unconscious, deeper way. So I think that shattered. And I started to kind of just move into a place of what would it mean to let go of these beliefs I've had and go into something greater and bigger and more concrete. So that's been I'm still in that journey, but I think it's been fascinating, and motherhood has really kind of honed me into something more simple, more true in my perspective, and it's been empowering and it's been beautiful and freeing, and I really feel most at peace I have in a very long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm in my own kind of limbo, messy middle. And, there was a period where I was like, does the phrase relationship anxiety coach even resonate for me anymore? Because it's so much more than that. It's like advocating for your needs and learning how to be kind to yourself and, learning how to actually love yourself. It's not just about like anxiety, it's about like this whole other thing. And so I couldn't agree with you more. And I feel like self-compassion is always a big part of both of our work with clients, but even then it can still get, am I doing self-compassion right? Am I self-compassionate enough? So totally understand that piece. But I think that it's okay to be on that journey. And I imagine like I have a 4.5-year-old niece on Nate's side. She's going to be our flower girl in a few weeks. And like recently, there were moments where I was like sitting doing a meditation or journaling, and I thought about her saying, something to me that I was saying to myself, like, I'm behind, or I should know this by now, or like, I should be better at this. And I was like, no, my heart breaks. Like, I would never want her to feel like she has to fix herself. And so I imagine that becoming a parent, there's this whole other lens on compassion and acceptance for who someone is, not having to like make them into somebody. So,
That's so beautiful. And I know that the work that we sometimes do is around inner child work and in terms of really seeing like how it would be if we were to tell a child what we're telling ourselves in a lot of ways. And the compassion piece is huge. And I think that motherhood forces you to, it's interesting, go into a place of like a sacrifice and also see sacrifice is in a compassionate way. Like I'm still working with that right now, kind of around this word sacrifice in terms of, how we can continue to bring compassion in the word of sacrifice, because that's what motherhood really is in my perspective, and just the compassion, the everlasting compassion piece, the constant need of that compassion piece, no matter what, the forgiveness of that constant piece of that. Yeah, it forces you into deeper, deeper, deeper love, into a place of what unconditional love really is. And in my perspective, it's the greatest work. It's the greatest
yeah.
work that we can do. Yeah.
Yeah. Oof. Yeah. That relationship with sacrifice, I imagine, yeah, it would take some, intentional framing in order for it to feel empowering. But before we were recording, you mentioned that you didn't really experience much ROCD in the pregnancy journey or after, but you did mention that there were some anxious or OCD tendencies that showed up for you after postpartum, and I'm sure since then, like in the last couple years. So, can you share a little bit more about some of the things you've noticed and how you've been able to coach yourself through those things?
Absolutely. I think that what I feel is unique about my experience and other people I've been noticing around me is that, there's like at least like 10 categories that you can find in a book of what OCD is, right? So you have like ROCD, sexual orientation OCD, harm OCD, scrupulosity, like all these forms of OCD. But I think that other people don't realize that obsessive compulsive behavior and anxiety can seep in different ways that they don't realize. So I think that that's what happened to me. So usually when you think of like postpartum OCD, it's around, am I going to drop my child? And you can't stop obsessing around that, right? Or what if I harm my child? Or what if something happens to my child? But in my perspective, it can also seep in different ways, almost like similar to ROCD, where for me, it was like, am I a good mother enough? Like almost in a sense of, am I meant to be a mother? And almost checking my feelings around how I feel about being a mother. And then also just feelings of like, okay, if I'm feeling good right now and connected to my child, then it's right. It's so similar to RCD, right? It's so similar to that experience of, okay, am I, doing this right around this perfectionism? And underneath, seeping underneath is definitely this feeling of similar things. Of what if I lose my child? What if not? What if I'm not good enough as a mother? Because if I'm not good enough as a mother, that must mean I shouldn't be a parent. And if I shouldn't be a parent, then maybe I made a mistake. And then like all the FOMO and, all of these things that are so a part of our OCD, I didn't realize we're starting to kind of seep into motherhood. I didn't realize it because no one really talks about those kind of like small little things. You usually hear postpartum OCD again as like, what if something bad happens to my child? But I think with people with ROCD, there's more of this thing of like, how am I feeling? Am I feeling okay? Do I love my child? Am I connected to them enough? Am I present with them enough? I think that that was one thing of like seeing my child and how I'm feeling, and then feeling like a moment of, reassurance or regulation and kind of getting the high from that. And then that kind of starting again. So some of the work that I had to do was around like, if I'm feeling disconnected with my child, that's okay. Because I think that there's almost like a survival aspect of a biological aspect. You need to feel connected to your child in some way to keep them alive, right?
Of course,
But I
yeah.
think that what it really taught me was being okay with feeling different feelings throughout having a baby. But I think there can be a little bit more pressure because it's your baby. It's not like your husband. And
Yeah.
everyone's different, but I think I didn't realize that until I started to be like, wait, I know these tendencies. I've
Yeah.
been here before. I've seen these obsessive compulsive behaviors, but I'm going into compulsion right now. Oh, wow, that's so interesting. Okay, doing exposure work with that and really, bringing the tools that I had prior in RCD to these little pieces that I didn't realize were there.
Yeah. It's like the root is still like wanting to be enough and wanting to make sure you're safe and wanting to do the right thing, but the symptoms of analyzing and checking and, like judging and trying to figure out like those can kind of, what I'm hearing you say is like spill into really any category of your life that's meaningful to you.
Absolutely. And I think that's an important thing to kind of, you know, bring up in terms of it still comes down to your values, right? Like comes down to what you value and what you care about and how the obsessive compulsive behavior and the anxiety can, go after that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear a little bit more. I'll ask in two separate questions, but the question is the same. I'd love to know first, like what you've learned about yourself now that you're a mom, but then the follow-up question would be, what have you learned about relationships, like romantically as becoming parents?
So the first question is, what have I learned about myself?
Yeah.
I
Everything.
think that I know literally everything. And what's so cool about motherhood is it's a continual journey because your child, whatever stage they are in, will most likely, I'm not saying this for everyone, but what I've noticed with myself and other people, it will project whatever you haven't seen within yourself. And so what I mean by that is, for example, the newborn stage is a lot about feeding and a lot about, survival and caretaking and sleep and stuff. And a lot of our own insecurities around food or, how much is our baby eating or why aren't they weighing this much can almost sometimes be reflected in terms of how we feel about our own self. right? Or even
Mm,
how we were nurtured as kids, which is really interesting because I think that that goes after kind of the nonverbal piece that a lot of us have kind of these unconscious nonverbal wounds that we can't really express. We're like, it's in my body. I don't know how to express it, but they're really, from the nonverbal stages where we were newborns. And a lot of that can, be projected onto our child as well. And it's not in any way to say, okay, now that it's being projected, we must do the work and fix that, but just to more so bring about the awareness that that's okay, that it may come up and recognize again that, wow, okay, maybe I didn't get this care and this attention when I was young, and kind of tending to those pieces as we tend to our child. So, with that being said, every stage is interesting. Like my child right now, he's 2. He's in a tantrum stage. I notice I'm okay more with his sadness, or if there's like something that's connected to, for example, like if he's upset about maybe not being able to get a cup, I am more understanding of that than just regular irritation. So regular irritation, I struggle with it more because I think I struggle that within myself, right? Like it's a
mm,
sense of if I have a reason for something, it's easier for me to work with it. And I think that's for a
mm.
lot of us because there's a sense of certainty, there's a sense of control. It's like, oh, I know what I'm irritated at. Versus if my son is irritated at something and I don't know, I have to, really work with that within myself and be like, okay, but it's still okay if he's irritated and I don't need to know why. He doesn't need to know why either,
Yeah.
So I think that ever stage is evolving, and it's interesting also, again, the societal expectations of seeing even, my friends around me and how they treat their children in terms of their own projection. So I think that's been interesting. Like
Mm,
every stage is different, and it brings up beauty, and it also brings up the thorns, the challenges.
yeah.
Um, and so that's been really interesting. I actually realize within myself, this might be really interesting for me to say, but I realize how very selfish I am,
Mm,
actually. And I think that motherhood, and I think that our society reinforces a sense of selfishness. I actually really do believe that. But I think that motherhood says, even if I'm feeling a certain way, this doesn't mean to neglect our needs, right? Or to neglect ourselves or like put ourselves down. But even if I'm feeling a certain way, I'm going to extend out to my baby right now and give them love, even if there's a part within myself that's like, I don't want to do this.
yeah.
I don't want to be here. I don't want to be at this park for like the 50th time. And I
Mm,
really think that it forces you to really kind of take a step away from yourself into a sacrifice of love. And I
mm,
think that we can talk about that in marriage in terms of relationship. I think it's similar. I think that there's different periods within a partnership where there is a sacrifice that's required. I think there's an extra sacrifice when someone has ROCD, because it's almost like, I really don't want to do this. I actually have to go into exposure. Everything within me is screaming, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm going to extend my hand to love. Right. And I think
mm,
it's very similar with motherhood as well. So I think it's forced me to really be more compassionate, more understanding, more empathetic. I think it's forced me to um, come out of my own bubble in terms of my selfish ways. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't see selfishness as like, bad or good or anything like that. It just is. And I think that it's allowed me to, yeah, to interestingly, as I step into more of that sacrifice, I've actually felt more deeper love, which is
mm.
really interesting, right? Because I think our society tends to be like me, what I want, what I want, what I want, what I want, what I desire, my needs. I need to have this all the time. And I don't think that as a society we're meant to be consumed so much with ourselves. So I think motherhood allows us to step outside ourselves a bit more into love.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
love that. It's kind of like I don't know if it's a trend or just like a sentiment that's going around. Maybe you've heard on social media where people are like, everyone wants a village, but they're not a villager or something. Like, we all want just to like have this rich community, but then we don't think about how can I contribute to this community. And of course, not everybody. Like, I think most people try to be generous and try to reach out and, continue with friendships and family relationships. But I think that we've lost some of that with the individualistic,
absolutely.
even what you were saying earlier, the self-healing, self-help. It's like all very
Absolutely.
self-focused.
It's so self-focused. And I think that that's why a lot of people with RCD and even in relationships get confused, because they're like, wait, it's getting hard. I thought this was supposed to be easy, in terms of why is my relationship kind of pushing back on certain things within not my relationship, but why there's things within myself that I'm feeling resistance on. And I think that that's why our culture is so quick in terms of like the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, because we've become so, well, things should be easy, things should be quick. And when things are hard, that must mean something is wrong. Obviously, as I'm talking about, there's always the exception. I'm never saying for every single person, but it's interesting to see this as a culture. I think that this is praised on in some way. But I love that you brought that example up about like everyone wants a village, but no one wants to be a villager. It takes that commitment, takes that work, right? To have what we are wanting to have. And I see that with motherhood and, partnership as well.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing kind of the analogy about how at every stage you're getting that mirror back to you of maybe, things about yourself. It makes sense. And that definitely makes me think about how it is an ongoing journey and the lessons about yourself will come at many ages, which is really cool. And then as far as your romantic relationship, how have things been going? I know that bringing a child into the world, or I imagine, and from what I've seen, it adds this extra nuance. And there's, now you're starting to input, like, what do I think as far as how they should be raised and all these different things. So, what have you learned in your marriage now that you're a parent?
Postpartum is definitely hard. I mean, you're not sleeping. Your hormones are raging. You're disagreeing on at least my experience. I just want to normalize this for people. You're disagreeing on so many different things. You're disagreeing maybe on the way that one is parenting. There's a lot of stuff coming up in terms of, balancing the household. If your partner's working and you're not, and you might be missing work and your partner is, not, and all of these complexities. So I think in the beginning and postpartum, yeah, we definitely struggled. Yeah, we definitely struggled. At least the first 6 months, I would say, were really hard. I also experienced some postpartum depression for some time. It was really hard in terms of my hormones. I definitely had this sense of like in the beginning, I can do it myself. I don't need anyone. And then I was like, oh wait, I do need people. And it was this is kind of that struggle. And the lack of sleep really makes you feel as though you're against each other completely. It's definitely a war zone in that way. At least for us, it was definitely a war zone. But I do believe that in turn now actually our relationship is the best it's ever been ever in our whole life, and I'm so grateful for that. I think that you're going to need to go through challenges within a partnership. I think we all know that, but it's important to just normalize that, going through different challenges. Maybe like in 6 months my husband and I will go through a hard time if our son isn't sleeping, or something happened within our partnership that is causing friction because of parenthood or other type of stuff or relational stuff. But overall, right now we're in a beautiful, beautiful place, and I'm so very grateful for that. And I think it's important to note that we're in a beautiful place doesn't mean that before postpartum wasn't like hell at different times, and before that we were at a
Yeah.
beautiful place. So it's just important to kind of be able to hold the space for so many different things. And I think that another huge thing that motherhood did and continues to do is to really show me that life isn't one thing, meaning you can hold happiness and joy and also a sense of loneliness and frustration. You could be like, my goodness, my son, my sweet son, I love you. Oh my goodness, I miss not being a mother,
Mm,
or like, oh my goodness, I'm just like so frustrated with your irritation. But wow, I was able to hold space to that. And what a sense of courage I have right now.
mm,
I've never experienced such conflicting emotions at the same time with motherhood. And I think it showed me just how that is life, how that is
yeah.
life. And I feel as though it's incredible how we can be bored, but then so happy at the same time, or just so tired, but then just so, um, so I don't know,
Fulfilled.
fulfilled at the same time. Yeah. And then so angry, but then like so hopeful at the same time. And I think that that's what motherhood has also showed me. And I think that's part of RCD and relationship anxiety, right? It teaches you
Yeah.
that, but motherhood deepens it.
For sure. And thank you for, normalizing your experience because just like the most glamorous parts, like I said, make it to social media for our relationships. I think the
Yeah.
same is true for parenting. Most people aren't saying, "Oh, my child like was screaming all night," or like, we were snipping at each other all week. We're both so exhausted." Like that
Yeah,
almost never makes it to social media. And so you have to only know that if you share and talk about it with friends. And even sometimes friends don't want to share, like we're going through a hard time
absolutely.
postpartum, it just feels like this shamey thing for some reason, but it shouldn't be.
Absolutely. I think that it goes back to almost similar with RCD and relationship anxiety, whereas mothers don't want to be heard that they're doing something wrong.
Exactly.
And the thing about motherhood though is someone will tell you, like if you look at comments and you're a mother, like when you become a mother and your algorithm starts going for all this motherhood, someone will post something and the amount there's like 200 comments of someone being, you shouldn't do that with your baby. Why is your baby like all this? And why aren't you safely sleeping with them? And why are you giving them a bottle? They're 3 years old. Like the amount of the shame and the amount of the judgment is so open on motherhood. And I think that that's why we don't express because deep down, we don't want to hear that we're trying our best. And
Hmm.
it's the same with relationship, right? Like we don't want to really show different scary things, not scary, but like difficult things on social media because with people with RCD, they don't want to hear, why are you feeling that way, And
Exactly.
it just comes down to just being human and we're just all just trying our best and that's okay. Yeah, that's what being human is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, luckily I feel like more people are starting to share some of that authenticity, but I think there's always going to be, like you said, a degree where we don't want to because of we just want to be doing our best and not have outsiders'
Have our
opinions.
privacy.
And I think that's okay too, but we just have to remember like how many people are going through their own hard time and you don't see it. And so I think that's the both and it's like people
Absolutely.
might not be sharing it openly and that feels painful because you want to feel less alone and it is happening and just trust that
Absolutely.
whatever hard emotions you feel other people feel too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Amazing. Well, I heard you say the word thorn earlier. I was going to ask this question of like, what are your maybe top rose and thorn in this season of being a mom that you've experienced thus
Yeah.
far?
I think the thorn piece is the occasional loneliness. I would
Mm,
say that comes with motherhood. Um, And, I think in our society, there's almost a sense of like, if you're feeling lonely, that's bad. And I think that it's allowed me to be with myself more instead of compulsively trying to be with people all the time, which is a continual still growth thing that I might have for the rest of my life. Who knows? I think that um, I've just, since I was young, been obsessed with being around girlfriends. I just love my girlfriends, and there's a beauty to that, but it can sometimes be compulsive. So I think that that's taught me that the loneliness piece of how you can feel so connected, but then also lonely and miss different parts within your life that you had before. The roses pieces, I've never experienced so much love and, could cry always about it. So much joy at the same time, and also like a deep sense of purposeful fulfillment. Not everyone experiences that, and that's okay. And I actually didn't experience that in the beginning. I think postpartum, I was just like, I don't feel like I'm like a mom. Like
mm,
I don't feel, you know, I don't feel like I'm meant to be a mom. Like I would compare myself to my friends and be like, they know that their purpose is to be a mom. And I think that that again comes down to kind of the societal obsession that we have around purpose right now. This is my purpose, this is what I should do, all these type of things. And I think for me, I did not feel that way at the beginning. I was like, I'm a mom and I actually want to work more than being a mom right now.
mm.
But that's shifted. Recently, I've been more like, I want to be a mom. So I think the fulfillment and the deepness and the lessons that I've been going through have been beautiful. And I've been just so amazed at my own spiritual shifts and changes that have occurred. And I'm so grateful for that motherhood. I think the beautiful thing about things that are hard is if you choose, it can lead you to the deepest, most profound areas and experiences in your life.
Mm, I love that. Well, it was really great to hear more. And obviously, again, this isn't my exact experience yet, but I feel like this is really helpful to hear kind of the ups and the downs and all of it, and know that both and exists in parenthood,
Yes.
just like in
Both
any other
and
part of life. So,
yeah.
you might remember one of my final questions I ask my guests because this is the You Love and You Learn podcast. What is one thing you have learned about love? And maybe more recent. It can be, anything that's come up for you that you would want to share.
Think recently I've learned, and I would have never said this, so I'm just saying this because it's surprising for myself. Would have never said this like 10 years ago. I think one thing that learned about love is it's okay sometimes if it feels like a sacrifice. I think that I used to be so against that word and so against anything that had to do with sacrifice, but it can be purposeful. Sacrifice can be purposeful, and sacrifice can actually deepen love and bring about more love. Doesn't mean we're neglecting again ourselves and our needs, but I think that there can be a beauty in that. And I think that that's one thing I've really learned about love. There's so many things I've learned about love, but that's one thing that comes up.
Yeah.
And your second question was, what have I learned? Or what was your second question? I'm
Oh
sorry.
no, second question will just be like, where can people stay connected with you? But that was just
Okay, okay.
the first
What
one.
have I learned?
Yeah.
Okay, about love.
Yeah.
Um,
But you answered
um,
it already as far as the
yes.
lesson. So if
Okay,
you want to
awesome.
share more, you can. But the last
Awesome.
question is just like, what do you have going on? Where can people, find you? And what do you want people to know about the work you're doing
Absolutely.
now?
So our platform is awakenintolove.com. So you can find all of our information at awakenintolove.com. You can find us on YouTube at awakenintolove.com, Instagram with Awaken Into Love. And yeah, we'll be starting to post some new stuff here and there. We're trying to expand right now, but of course our work has been for the last almost 10 years on relationship OCD and anxiety and couples work. But we'll be starting to expand soon. We'll kind of talk a little bit more about that later on our channel and stuff, but all relationship OCD stuff and anxiety stuff we're there.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It was
Thank
great
you,
to
Sarah.
reconnect in this season
You
and
too.
excited to see what else you have coming up. And thank you everyone for being here, and we'll see you in the next episode.